The repair bay was quiet except for the steady hum of machines. Rows of metallic tools lined the walls, and the faint smell of heated steel filled the air. Tomasz, a human engineer, stood at his workbench, carefully sorting the instruments he would need. He was not an important man in the grand eyes of the galaxy, but his hands carried a rare skill. Where others saw scraps of metal, Tomasz saw possibilities. Today, he was given a task unlike any before. The armor of Princess Alira, heir to the Zelran Empire, had been damaged in battle and brought to him for repair. This was not just any suit of armor, it was a symbol of pride for her people, forged with technology passed down through generations. The slightest mistake could be seen as an insult. The smallest flaw could cost him more than his career. When the doors opened, Tomasz lifted his head. Princess Alira stepped into the room, her step smooth and commanding. She was tall, with sharp eyes that carried the weight of leadership. 2 guards followed her, but even they kept a respectful distance. She looked around the repair bay with a faint expression of disapproval, as though the simple place was unworthy of her presence. Her armor rested in a large case that the guards placed gently on the table. The polished plates, once radiant, were now scarred and fractured. Tomasz could see the cracks even before he touched them. He reached for his gloves, but before he began, Alira spoke. "You are the human who will fix this?" she asked, her tone even but edged with doubt. "Yes, Princess," Tomasz answered simply. He did not bow deeply as others might have. Instead, he offered a respectful nod and turned his eyes back to the armor. Alira's gaze narrowed. Most in her court feared her, but this human showed no fear. It was unusual, and she watched him with quiet curiosity. Tomasz set the chest piece on his workbench and ran a scanner across it. The screen flickered with lines of data, showing fractures and weaknesses hidden beneath the surface. He frowned, leaning closer. The cracks were deeper than he expected, stretching like veins across the metal. This armor had not only been struck, it had been pushed beyond its limits. One of the guards shifted impatiently. "Work quickly, human. The princess has little time to waste." Tomasz did not look up. "If I rush, the repairs will fail," he said. "Armor is not something to patch. It must be made whole again." Alira tilted her head slightly at his words. She did not stop him. She wanted to hear more, but Tomasz said nothing else. His focus was absolute, his hands moving with careful precision as he cleaned the damaged plates. The hours passed slowly. Tomasz worked without pause, dismantling each part with steady hands. Alira remained silent, though her sharp eyes followed his every movement. She was used to warriors who boasted of their strength, leaders who demanded attention. But this human spoke little, and yet his presence carried weight. At one point, Tomasz paused, holding a fragment of the shoulder plate up to the light. He noticed a faint shimmer in the metal, a mark left by a weapon far more dangerous than ordinary plasma fire. He made a note in his datapad but said nothing for now. He wanted to be certain before speaking. The silence grew heavier until Alira finally broke it. "Why do you work with such care?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. "This is not the armor of your people. To you, it must mean nothing." Tomasz glanced at her for the first time since he had begun. "Because broken things deserve to be made whole," he replied. His tone was steady, without hesitation. Alira's eyes lingered on him. The answer was simple, but it carried weight she had not expected. She had grown up in a court where every word was calculated, every action meant to gain power. Yet this human spoke with honesty, and it unsettled her more than she cared to admit. When Tomasz returned to his work, Alira leaned back in her chair, studying him. For the first time, she wondered if the stories about humans being weak and unworthy were wrong. By the time the lights dimmed to signal the evening cycle, Tomasz had carefully restored several sections of the armor. He stepped back to stretch his hands, then looked at the princess. It will take time, he said plainly. The damage is not simple. Alira nodded, her expression unreadable. Do what you must, she said. Then, after a pause, she added softly, I will watch. It was a small change, but Tomasz noticed it. She no longer spoke as if he were beneath her. The night settled over the repair bay, but neither human nor princess left their place. One worked with steady patience, the other watched with growing curiosity. Between them, a fragile thread of understanding began to form, though neither yet knew how strong it might become. The repair bay was quiet except for the sound of Tamash's tools clicking against the metal. Princess Alira sat nearby, her posture straight, her sharp eyes fixed on him. The guards had left at her command, leaving only the two of them in the chamber. She wanted no distractions. Tomasz continued working, his hands steady as he examined the fractured leg plates of her armor. Every movement carried patience, as though he had all the time in the world. Alira found this unusual. In her empire, speed and efficiency were praised above all else. But here was a human, careful with every step, unwilling to rush even under the gaze of a princess. After a long silence, Alira finally spoke. You work as if this armor belongs to you, she said. Her voice was calm but carried curiosity. Why does it matter so much? You are human. This armor is part of my people's heritage, not yours. Tomasz paused, setting his tool down gently on the table. He lifted his head and met her eyes. It matters because it is broken, he said simply. And broken things should be made whole again. Alira tilted her head slightly. She had expected a long explanation, perhaps even a desperate attempt to impress her. Instead, she was given plain words spoken without hesitation. That is your reason, she asked. Yes, Tomasz replied. Metal does not care who wears it. It deserves to be restored. That is my work, and I will do it with care, no matter who stands before me. His words lingered in the air. Alira leaned back in her chair, silent for a moment. For years she had been surrounded by people who spoke only to gain her favor. Her generals praised her, her advisors flattered her, and even her soldiers bowed in fear. But this human spoke with honesty, and there was no fear in his tone. She narrowed her eyes. You do not seem to fear me, she said. Most who stand in my presence cannot even meet my gaze. Tomasz gave a faint shrug. Fear is not useful in repair. If my hands shook, your armor would remain cracked. Respect is enough. Fear only gets in the way. Alira studied him carefully. His calmness unsettled her more than open defiance ever could. She was used to commanding respect by her title alone, yet this man treated her as someone ordinary. It was insulting in one sense, but strangely refreshing in another. Tomasz returned to his work, running a scanner along the edge of the armor. He frowned as the display revealed deeper scars within the alloy. The damage was not from ordinary battle. He recognized the signature pattern of energy left behind by restricted weapons. It was the kind of damage no craftsman could easily hide. Alira noticed his expression. What did you find? She asked sharply. Tomasz hesitated for a moment, then answered with care. The fractures are not from normal combat. A forbidden weapon left these marks. Someone hid this from you. Her eyes narrowed at once. The thought of her generals or advisors keeping secrets from her filled her with cold anger. Are you certain? Yes, Tomasz said firmly. I have seen this pattern before on the battlefield. It weakens the core of the armor, not just the surface. If it is not repaired properly, the next strike could break through. Silence filled the bay. Alira's hands curled slightly in her lap, her sharp gaze fixed on the damaged plates. If what he said was true, then her own people had failed her. Yet this human, a stranger from a race her empire often dismissed as weak, had spoken the truth without hesitation. She let out a slow breath. You risk much by telling me this, she said at last. If you are wrong, it could cost you everything. I would rather speak the truth than remain silent, Tomasz replied. His tone was steady, not proud, simply honest. If I repair the surface and ignore the deeper scars, then I would be no better than those who lied to you. Alira's gaze softened for the first time. She did not say it aloud, but she was impressed. Few among her own people would have dared speak so plainly to her. Fewer still would have done so with such calmness. The hours passed as Tomasz continued his work. Alira no longer sat stiffly in her chair. She leaned forward slightly, watching the way his hands moved across the armor. There was no arrogance in him, no desire to prove superiority. Only a quiet determination to make the armor whole again. At one point, Tomasz adjusted the power tools and spoke without looking up. Your armor will be stronger when I am done. But strength is not only in the metal. It is also in the one who wears it. Alira raised an eyebrow. You speak as if you know what it means to fight in armor. Tomasz shook his head. I have never worn armor. But I have seen enough battles to know this, metal protects, but it is the will of the one inside that decides victory. His words struck her more deeply than she expected. She had trained her whole life to be strong, to carry the weight of her people. Yet in this moment, the reminder felt different. Coming from a human, it carried a strange kind of honesty she could not dismiss. When Tomasz finally set his tools aside, the repaired plates glimmered under the light. Alira rose from her chair and stepped closer. She reached out, her fingers brushing over the restored surface. The cracks were gone, replaced by clean lines that looked even stronger than before. She looked at Tomasz, her eyes sharp yet thoughtful. You speak as though every piece of metal has value, she said softly. Tomasz gave a faint smile. Everything has value, princess. Sometimes people forget to see it. But it is always there. Alira held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, she stepped back and returned to her seat. Yet in her mind, a new question began to form. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps humans were not as her people believed. The next morning, the repair bay opened with the same hum of machines, but something felt different. Princess Alira returned, this time without her guards. She carried herself with the same proud steps, yet her sharp gaze no longer looked at the room with disdain. Instead, her eyes turned quickly to the workbench where Tomasz had laid out the repaired pieces of her armor. Tomasz stood ready, already working on the chest plate. His hands moved with steady patience, polishing the surface and preparing to weld a replacement layer inside. He barely noticed her arrival, so focused was he on his task. You begin before I arrive, Alira said, her tone calm. Work does not wait, Tomasz answered, not lifting his head. The armor is damaged deep within. If I leave it half done, it will fail when you need it most. Alira stepped closer, studying his tools and the glowing lines on the scanner screen. The images showed fractures branching like rivers inside the chest plate. They were thin but dangerous, weakening the structure from within. Her jaw tightened. You were right, she said quietly. This damage is not from common weapons. Tomasz finally looked up, meeting her eyes. Yes. It is the mark of a weapon your council forbids. Someone used it against you, and someone else chose to hide that truth. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Alira's mind raced. If her generals had known, why had they not told her? To hide weakness? To protect her pride? Or perhaps to protect themselves from her anger? She crossed her arms, standing tall, but her thoughts betrayed her calm expression. The empire taught her that her people were stronger, wiser, and above all, united. Yet here was proof of deceit within her own circle. You speak boldly for a human, she said, trying to mask the unease in her voice. I speak because the truth matters, Tomasz replied. His tone was steady, without arrogance. If I lied, your armor would fail again. I will not let that happen. Alira studied him. His words carried no fear, no hesitation. He was not trying to gain favor or position. He simply spoke as though honesty was the only path he could take. That made her pause. She moved closer, examining the chest plate herself. Her fingers traced the faint grooves along the surface. In my empire, honesty is often used as a weapon, she said softly. Yet you speak it without care for how it is received. Tomash gave a faint smile. Truth is not a weapon. It is a tool. What you do with it decides if it brings harm or healing. The words stayed in her mind long after he said them. Hours passed as Tomash worked, carefully removing the weakened sections of alloy and replacing them with reinforced layers. The process was slow, demanding precision, but he never once rushed. His patience impressed Alira, though she would not admit it aloud. She found herself watching him not only with curiosity but with respect. His hands carried no sign of noble birth, yet his skill was undeniable. Where her people prized strength and battle, this human showed a different kind of strength, the kind found in focus, honesty, and care. As the afternoon wore on, Tomash paused to check the energy core connected to the armor. His scanner beeped softly, displaying faint traces of instability. His brow furrowed. This is worse than I thought, he muttered. Alira leaned closer. What is it? The core has been stressed, Tomash explained. The forbidden weapon did not just scar the plates. It reached into the heart of your armor. If it had gone unnoticed, it could have failed in the next battle. Her eyes widened slightly. To her people, armor was more than protection, it was identity, honor, and a shield for their leaders. To think that hers had been left to fail was more than carelessness. It was betrayal. You are certain of this? She asked. Yes, Tomash said. But it can still be repaired. It will take time and effort, but I can make it whole again. Alira let out a slow breath. She felt a mix of anger and gratitude, emotions she rarely allowed herself. Anger at her own counsel for hiding the truth, gratitude toward this human who revealed it. You risk angering my empire with these words, she said, her voice low. I would rather risk anger than let you walk into danger unprepared, Tomash answered. His reply was simple, but it shook her more than she expected. In her life, loyalty often came with conditions, bargains, or hidden motives. Yet this man spoke of risk without asking for anything in return. As Tomash returned to his work, Alira sat in silence, her mind turning. For the first time, she began to doubt the lessons drilled into her since childhood. Were humans truly weak? Or had her people chosen blindness to preserve their pride? When the day cycle ended, Tomash had finished restoring most of the chest plate. He wiped his hands and looked at Alira. Tomorrow, the armor will be ready for full testing, he said. Alira nodded slowly. Her eyes lingered on him longer than before. You see more than others, Tomash. Perhaps even more than those who claim to be my protectors. He gave a small shrug. Sometimes the truth is clear, if one is willing to look. Alira said nothing more, but as she left the repair bay that evening, her steps felt heavier. A seed of doubt had been planted within her heart. For the first time, she began to question not only the honesty of her counsel but the very foundation of what her people believed about humanity. And that thought unsettled her far more than any battle ever had. The following morning, the repair bay felt different. Princess Alira entered with a lighter step, though her eyes still held their sharp edge. She watched Tomash work on her armor, her hands clasped lightly in front of her. The quiet hum of machines filled the room, punctuated only by the sound of Tomash's tools against the metal. Tomash did not notice her at first, so focused was he on aligning the plates for the shoulder section. Every piece had to fit perfectly, every joint had to slide without friction. Alira had expected him to work quickly, as most engineers did, but he moved with careful patience. It fascinated her. She finally spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. Tomasz, why do you care so much for something that belongs to someone else? Tomasz paused, adjusting a small clamp. He looked at her briefly before returning to his work. Because care is not about ownership, he said simply. It is about what is right. Broken things should be made whole, and people deserve honesty. That is all. Alira tilted her head, considering his words. They were simple, yet they carried weight. She had been raised to value power, obedience, and loyalty, but not honesty without motive. In her world, every action had a reason, usually tied to advantage or survival. Yet here was a human who acted without expectation, without fear, and without desire for reward. She studied him quietly for a moment. Your people are told we are lesser, she said slowly. That humans are weak, unskilled, unworthy. And yet here you stand, doing what my own engineers cannot. Tomasz did not answer immediately. He focused on smoothing a rough edge on the shoulder plate, then finally looked at her. Strength does not always show in weapons or skill in battle, he said. It shows in patience, honesty, and doing what is right. That is the kind of strength your people overlook. Alira's eyes narrowed. His words challenged not only her understanding of humans but also the very foundation of her empire's teachings. She had been told to dismiss humans, to see them as fragile, incapable, and beneath her people. Yet this one human defied every expectation. She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. And yet you remain here, helping me, she said. Without complaint, without fear. Tomasz gave a faint shrug. Because it is necessary. You would not survive the next battle without proper armor. And if my work saves you, it does not matter who I am. That is what matters. Alira felt a strange mix of irritation and admiration. He spoke with calm honesty, and it made her question everything she had been taught. If humans were as weak as her people believed, how could one human act with such courage and care? Her mind wandered back to the moments before she had arrived at the repair bay. Her generals had spoken of humans as simple and weak. They had warned her not to trust them, not to rely on them. Yet Tomasz's actions proved otherwise. He risked his reputation, he ignored fear, and he acted with unwavering focus. Do you ever fear anything? She asked, almost unconsciously. Tomasz looked at her and shook his head. Fear is not useful when lives are at stake. I focus on what I can do, not what I might lose. Alira's eyes softened slightly. His courage was not the kind she had been trained to respect in warriors who wielded weapons. It was quiet, steady courage, the kind that came from choice, from principle, from understanding one's responsibility. As he worked, she noticed details she had not before. The careful alignment of joints, the reinforced plating, the way he checked the energy flow of the armor's core. Every movement carried thought and precision. He was not just fixing armor, he was preparing her for survival, for victory, for life itself. She could not remember the last time someone had cared so deeply without expectation. Not her soldiers, not her advisors, not even her closest allies. And in that realization, doubt began to grow. Her mind replayed Tomasz's words, his actions, his calm presence. Could it be possible that humans were stronger than her people believed? Could it be possible that her entire understanding of them was flawed? She leaned closer, watching his hands move with steady skill. You make it seem easy, she said softly. Tomasz glanced at her and gave a faint smile. Nothing that is worth doing is easy, princess. Strength shows not in how simple something appears but in the care with which it is done. Alira exhaled slowly. She sat down on a bench nearby, crossing her legs. For the first time, she allowed herself to question the stories she had been told, the lessons she had learned. Humans were not simply fragile or unworthy. This one human, in his quiet way, had shown her courage, skill, and honesty, qualities she had thought were rare in anyone outside her own people. The day wore on, and Tomasz continued his work, unaware of the thoughts swirling in her mind. Alira watched silently, her doubt growing stronger with each careful movement of his hands. She had begun to see something new: humans were not as weak as her empire had claimed. They were capable of care, courage, and truth. And if one human could show her this, perhaps there was hope that her people could see it too. Alira remained in the repair bay long after the machines had quieted. The questions in her mind were heavy, but they were also freeing. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider that the galaxy might be wider, stronger, and more complex than she had ever imagined. The sky above the repair bay was dark with the shadow of incoming ships. Alarms rang through the chamber, red lights flashing across the walls. Princess Alira's guards rushed in, shouting orders, but she barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on the repaired armor lying on the table. Tomasz had just finished inspecting the final joints when the first impact shook the building. The enemy had arrived sooner than expected. Alira's chest tightened as she realized the danger was real. Her armor, though repaired, had not yet been fully tested. She could not wait any longer. Tomasz turned to her, his calm expression steady. "Princess, if you wear it now, I will guide you. But you must follow my instructions exactly." Alira nodded. She had learned to trust her instincts, but she also knew that Tomasz had proven himself trustworthy. Without hesitation, she stepped into the armor, feeling the reinforced plating wrap around her like a second skin. Tomasz adjusted the final settings and checked the energy core. The faint glow stabilized, showing that the armor was ready. The doors of the repair bay burst open, and enemy soldiers poured in. Alira stepped forward, her movements precise, her mind focused. Tomasz's voice came through a small comm in her helmet. "Left foot first. Shield up. Watch the top flank." She followed his instructions exactly. Each movement was calculated, each strike effective. The enemy had expected hesitation, but she moved with confidence and speed that surprised even her own soldiers. Her armor absorbed attacks that would have broken ordinary protection, and Tomasz's guidance kept her steps efficient and safe. Alira glanced at Tomasz, who stayed near the rear of the bay, scanning the incoming threats. "How do you see so clearly from back there?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Experience and observation," Tomasz replied. "Focus on the patterns, not the panic." Her strikes were stronger than she had imagined. The repaired armor moved with her body, responding to her commands as if it understood her intent. She blocked a powerful energy blast aimed at her shoulder, feeling the reinforced plating hold firm. The enemy stumbled back, shocked by her precision. Alira's soldiers, seeing her courage, regained their confidence. They followed her lead, striking in unison, but it was clear that the princess's skill and Tomasz's guidance were the key to their success. During a brief pause in the attack, Alira took a breath and looked toward Tomasz. "You risk your life by staying here," she said. "I stay because it is necessary," Tomasz answered. "Your survival depends on your armor and your decisions. I help where I can." The enemy regrouped and pressed their attack harder. Alira dodged a heavy strike and countered with a blow that sent her opponent flying. She moved through the chaos with calm determination, trusting the human's instructions completely. Without his presence, she knew she would have faltered. After a tense few minutes, the enemy soldiers finally retreated, their formation broken and their morale low. Alira's chest heaved slightly as she took a moment to steady herself. The repaired armor had held perfectly. She had survived not only because of her skill but because of the human who had guided her every step. When the bay was finally quiet, she turned to Tomasz, her eyes sharp but filled with something new: respect. "You saved me," she said simply. Tomasz shook his head. "We saved you. You wore the armor and followed instructions. That is what mattered." Alira studied him carefully. Few humans would have risked their lives for someone they barely knew, especially someone from an empire that looked down on them. Tomasz had done it without hesitation, without expectation, without fear. He had placed her life above his own. For the first time, Alira understood that strength did not come only from weapons or titles. It came from courage, skill, and loyalty. And here was a human who embodied all three. She removed her helmet and let her hair fall around her shoulders. "Your people are different from what I was told," she said softly. "Perhaps stronger in ways we did not expect." Tomasz simply nodded, returning to check the armor's energy flow. "Strength shows in many ways, Princess. This is one of them." Alira looked around at the damaged bay and the defeated enemy. Her mind was racing, but for the first time, she felt gratitude that went beyond duty or protocol. This human had proven himself not by words or rank, but by action. He had seen her as someone worth saving, and in doing so, he had taught her a lesson her people had never considered: humanity had value, courage, and honor in its own way. The day ended with the bay quiet again. The alarms had stopped, the lights returned to normal, but the impact of the battle lingered in Alira's mind. She had survived because a human had guided her. She had learned a new kind of loyalty, one not demanded by rank or fear, but given freely and with purpose. Alira glanced at Tomasz, who was cleaning his tools, calm as ever. "Tomorrow," she said thoughtfully, "we test the armor again. And I want you to be with me." Tomasz looked up and smiled faintly. "I will be there, Princess. Always." For the first time, Alira understood something important: trust and courage were not bound by species, by rank, or by expectation. And she knew that humanity, in its own quiet way, had proven itself worthy of her respect. The repair bay was quiet once again, bathed in the soft glow of the overhead lights. Princess Alira stood beside the table, watching Tomasz carefully inspect the armor she had worn in battle the day before. Each plate gleamed under the lights, polished and reinforced, the energy core humming steadily. Alira had not expected to feel nervous in the presence of a human. Yet as she observed Tomasz moving with calm precision, a subtle tension lingered in her chest. She had survived because of him. His guidance had kept her alive, and his honesty had opened cracks in her beliefs about her people and humanity. Tomasz looked up, noticing her gaze. "The armor is ready for testing again," he said simply. "It is stronger than before. You will be safe if you follow the movements we practiced." Alira nodded, though her mind was distracted. The thought of how much she had relied on this human filled her with a strange mixture of admiration and unease. She had always prided herself on her skill and independence. To feel that someone had saved her not by commanding or ordering, but by guiding was unfamiliar. She stepped closer. "Tomasz," she said quietly, "why do you do this for me? Why do you treat me with care, when so many in my empire would never trust a human? Why risk yourself for someone who is, well, someone who should be your enemy?" Tomasz paused, his hands resting on the armor for a moment. He looked at her calmly. "I do not see you as an enemy," he said. "I see a person. A person who has been given a responsibility, and who deserves help when they are in danger. It is not about species or rank. It is about what is right." Alira studied him. His words were simple, yet they carried more weight than any speech she had heard in her life. He spoke without fear, without expectation, without hesitation. And in that moment, she realized something she had not admitted to herself before: she trusted him. Completely. "You could lie," she said softly, testing him. "You could take advantage of me. But you do not." Tomasz shook his head. "Because that is not who I am," he replied. "I have no reason to lie. I only have the duty to help where it is needed. Your life depends on this armor. I will not let you fail because of a mistake I could prevent." Alira's sharp eyes softened. His words, spoken plainly, left no room for doubt. He had acted without concern for personal gain, without fear, and without hesitation. In the quiet moments of the repair bay, she felt the truth in his actions more than in his words. The day passed slowly as they tested the armor. Tomasz guided her through drills, correcting her posture, adjusting the energy flow, and pointing out areas that required careful attention. Each movement was precise, yet natural. Alira found herself moving with confidence, knowing he was watching, instructing, and protecting. During a pause, Alira removed her helmet and ran a hand along the polished surface of the chest plate. "I do not understand," she admitted softly. "Why would a human risk so much for someone like me? My people have taught me to believe humans are weak and unworthy. But you," Tomasz looked at her calmly. "Strength is not only in size or power. It is in courage, in honesty, and in action. You survived yesterday because you acted, and because I acted with what I could offer. That is all there is to it." Alira's eyes lingered on him. For the first time, she allowed herself to see him not as a human from a distant world, but as a person of principle, someone whose actions proved the value of his words. She realized that trust and respect were not bound by empire or species. They were earned through deeds, and Tomasz had earned hers. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "I will not forget this," she said. "What you have done, what you risked, it changes how I see everything. My people, humanity, even myself." Tomasz gave a faint smile. "I do not expect gratitude. I only do what must be done. That is all that matters." Alira nodded slowly, feeling a sense of peace she had never known in the halls of her empire. She had learned a lesson that no teacher or counsel had ever given her. Courage, loyalty, and honesty could come from anywhere, even from someone her people had dismissed as weak. As the sun set outside the bay, Alira placed her hand briefly on Tomasz's shoulder, a small gesture of trust and acknowledgement. "I am beginning to understand," she said softly. "Humans are not what my people claim. They are capable, loyal, and strong." Tomasz looked at her, his calm expression unchanged. "I am glad you see it," he said. "Actions speak louder than words. That is the truth I can show." Alira smiled faintly, a mixture of respect and newfound understanding in her eyes. She realized that their bond was more than simple duty. It was trust, earned through shared effort, courage, and honesty. And in a galaxy full of conflict and deception, that trust was rare and valuable. As she left the repair bay that evening, her mind carried a quiet determination. She would change how her empire viewed humans. She would teach them that strength and courage could appear in unexpected forms. And she would never forget the human who had shown her that truth, not through words alone, but through action. For the first time, Princess Alira felt that the galaxy was wider, more complex, and more hopeful than she had ever imagined. And she knew that the bond she shared with Tomasz would shape her future in ways she had not yet understood. The next morning, the repair bay was alive with quiet energy. Princess Alira entered, her armor fully restored, gleaming under the lights. Today, there would be no simple testing, this would be the final trial. The full function of the armor would be tested, and she would move freely in it for the first time since Tomasz repaired it. Tomasz was already at the workbench, checking the energy core and final calibrations. When he saw her enter, he gave a small nod. "Everything is ready," he said calmly. "You will feel the difference immediately." Alira stepped into the armor with care, feeling the reinforced plating adjust perfectly to her body. Every joint moved with ease, every layer responded to her motions as if it were a part of her. She could feel the strength it offered, not only in protection but in confidence. "Thank you, Tomasz," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "For everything." Tomasz glanced at her and shook his head. "No thanks are needed, Princess. I did only what was necessary." That is enough. Alira paused, studying him. For days, he had worked tirelessly, repairing her armor, guiding her, and protecting her. He had spoken honestly, acted bravely, and risked his life without asking for reward. In all the lessons of her life, she had never encountered loyalty like this. "You have shown me something important," she said finally. "Humans are stronger than my people believed. Stronger in ways that cannot be measured with weapons or rank." Tomash looked at her calmly, giving only a faint nod. "Strength shows in many forms, princess. Courage, honesty, and care are just as important as skill in battle. That is what I hope you see." Alira adjusted her helmet and activated the suit. She felt the flow of energy through the armor, steady and powerful. Tomash had tested every joint, every plate, every function. She moved with fluid precision, stepping into the open training area where a set of holographic targets awaited her. Tomash observed silently, his eyes sharp, guiding her subtly through small adjustments in her stance. Alira moved with confidence, striking each target with skill that surprised even her own trained mind. The armor responded perfectly, as if it had been designed just for her. When she finished the sequence, she turned to Tomash. "I understand now," she said. "The work you did was more than fixing metal. You prepared me. You gave me strength, but also clarity." Tomash's expression remained calm, but there was a small smile in his eyes. "That is the purpose of repair, princess. To restore not only the object but also the one who relies on it." Alira took a deep breath and removed her helmet. For a moment, she simply looked at him, seeing not only a human but someone who had earned her trust and respect. "I will not forget this," she said softly. "Not just the work, but the way you acted. Loyalty, courage, and honesty, these are things my empire needs to remember." Tomash nodded. "I do what I can. That is all any of us can do." Alira felt a shift within her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where humans and her people could stand together, not as enemies or rivals, but as allies. She realized that her empire's understanding of humans had been limited, built on assumptions and fear rather than observation and experience. "You have changed the way I see the galaxy," she said finally. "I will take this lesson back to my council. I will show them that strength comes in many forms, and that humans have value beyond what we were taught." Tomash gave a faint shrug, as if he did not expect praise, but Alira could see a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He had acted not for recognition, but for principle, and his actions spoke louder than words ever could. The princess walked to the edge of the training area, looking out through the large observation window. The sky was clear, the horizon bright with possibility. She turned back to Tomash. "I will trust you, always," she said. "Not because you are human, but because you have proven yourself worthy of that trust." Tomash's expression softened slightly. "And I will stand by you, princess. As long as you need guidance or protection, I will be there." Alira smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we have both gained something. You have shown me the value of courage and honesty, and I have learned to see beyond what I was taught. Together, we can do more than any of us could alone." As the day ended, the repaired armor gleamed in the light, a symbol of trust, courage, and the bond between human and princess. Alira had survived not only because of skill, but because someone had chosen to act with loyalty and care. And in that choice, she saw the true strength of humanity. For the first time, she felt that the galaxy was wide and full of possibilities. And she knew that with humans like Tomash by her side, there was no challenge she could not face. The bond they shared was more than duty, it was respect, trust, and understanding. And it would shape the future of both their peoples in ways that no one could have predicted.